Hi there and welcome to part one of the I'm Taking Charge Fundamentals course. This is Damien Murdoch with you, and I'm going to start by recapping from the welcome video and quickly go over a few key concepts that we'll be talking about as we make our way through the course. So we talked about the chemicals which pump through our body and how any emotion is just a bunch of chemicals. We talked about how those chemicals are released unconsciously without thinking, but how they can also be controlled with our mind, with what we think about and focus on. We'll learn about the structure of anxiety, so that's taking your mind out into the future and imagining bad things happening, and the effect that that has on the release of these chemicals. We covered how the brain's primary job is to keep you safe, and so it will show you a threat, but we don't always need to take that thought so seriously. And we introduced you to the subconscious mind and the concept of programming. Now, one job of the subconscious mind is to get things done as efficiently as possible. So think about the example we used of learning to drive a car. The subconscious is programmed and then takes that job over. Another job of the subconscious mind is to look after you, to keep you safe. And I'll give you an example of programming with regard to this. So think of when you were a child and you burnt your hand on the hot plate of a stove. The memory of that is stored in a part of the brain called the hippocampus, and the emotion that goes with that is stored in another part called the amygdala. So you don't have to think about not touching the hot plate again. We're programmed not to do that. You see a hot plate and the correlation is made between the memory in the hippocampus and the emotion in the amygdala. Hot plate means pain. We don't touch it. So this is how our subconscious stress response protects us, and it's how we learn and adapt as we go through life. But then let's use public speaking as an example of how this programming may have gone a bit haywire. Jerry Seinfeld talks about how the majority of people would rather be in the box at a funeral than delivering the eulogy. And if you're feeling anxiety or panic around public speaking, at some stage you've unconsciously set up a program whereby your body responds to that situation in the same way that it would to something like a deadly snake. Something has happened at some stage where the correlation has been made between the memory in the hippocampus and the emotional part of the brain, the amygdala, so that public speaking means danger. That belief has been set up. So when there's danger, you haven't got time to wait for your logical brain. The correlation is made and your body begins to prepare for danger. Chemicals are released without you thinking. You're getting that stress response, the fight or flight response in your body. How did that program get set up? Well, it's different for everybody, but perhaps you had a speech to do at school and it didn't go too well. Everyone laughed, you felt embarrassment and shame and put meaning on it that public speaking is not for you. Then, as you went through life, maybe you continued to find evidence to support that decision, and the belief becomes deeply ingrained, creating a programmed response, which can then tend to snowball and become more and more extreme. These programs feel normal, whether it's getting anxious or getting angry or upset, and then we live our life around them. If you're getting triggered by anything, you need to look at these programs that are firing off. Anxiety, road rage, domestic violence, one-punch attacks. These are all examples of people being triggered and reacting. So at World Class Friend, we use processes that identify the triggers and the emotion that goes with them, and we undo that correlation at the subconscious level so that you're not being triggered. So standing up in front of a room full of people doesn't mean that your stomach drops, your heart starts to beat out of your chest, you choke up, and you want to run for the nearest exit. Okay, so that's how a program can be set up. Let's look at the chain of events that happens as a program fires off. It's called the results chain because this is ultimately what gives us the results we get in life. And by a result, I mean any outcome we get in life, positive or negative. We start with a stimulus or event, so we take in some information through our five senses. Typically, we might see something or someone may say something to us. This triggers a belief in us, a belief we have about ourselves or the world, and chemicals are released to prepare us for our response to what's happening. You may feel this in your body. We then interpret what's happened. We give it meaning. For most of us, this usually happens unconsciously. We don't even know we're doing it. This meaning determines what further chemicals are released in our body to put us into a certain emotional state. This emotional state leads to our behavior or actions, and it's our behavior or actions which lead to our result. These results chains are playing out all day, every day. Micro chains can take a fraction of a second, so we get the results straight away, whereas the macro can play out over years, so the consequences come down the track. Now, this is one of the most important concepts you're ever going to need to grasp because these results over time give us the life we are living. Our life is a combination of these results chains. So when we learn to take charge of them, and that's what we're going to learn to do, we can get completely different results to what you may have become used to, and that's exciting. So let's continue to explore it by going through the chain using an example of how something like public speaking can result in a fully anxious state. So the stimulus could be that you're asked to stand and respond to something in front of a room full of people. That may trigger a belief you have that you are not a public speaker. Perhaps this belief about you not being a public speaker came from a time long ago when people laughed at you in class and has since been strengthened and become deeply ingrained. The mention of public speaking is enough to alert the body to danger, and it goes into what's called a stress response. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, glucose and cortisol are released as a part of what's often called the fight or flight response, which prepares you to fight or flee the threat. Your heart rate, blood pressure and respiratory rate all increase. You'll feel this in your body, and you may know that feeling all too well. You then interpret the situation, you give it meaning. Maybe something like, I'm feeling anxious, they'll see my weakness. I'll make a fool of myself here. The stress cascade of chemicals continues, putting you into a fully anxious state. You feel fear. Your heart's beating out of your chest, you start to sweat, your stomach drops, your breath shortens, and you may feel like you can't get any words out. This, of course, affects your actions. You may get a few sentences out, but it's certainly not what you're capable of. The result may be the regret of a missed opportunity. You've possibly drawn attention to yourself, which may have been the very thing you were fearing in the first place. And what you've done is gather more evidence to support that belief that you're not a public speaker. This is a continual feedback loop which becomes stronger and more entrenched. So you'll avoid public speaking at all costs and become increasingly anxious going into all kinds of situations, just because of the chance that you may be asked to speak. The results chain applies to all areas of your life. The stimulus or event can be something as simple as your first thought when you wake up in the morning. You start with a thought and it sets off this chain to put you into an anxious or depressed state before you even get out of bed. So what we need to do is learn how to intervene in this chain to change the result. That's what we're going to start to do on the next video. Until then, see if you can notice these results chains in action. For any outcome that you get, particularly any anxiety symptoms, see if you can identify the event that triggers that outcome and the way that you've interpreted that event, the meaning you put on whatever it was that happened. And I'll see you on the next video.